This is Geek Gab with your host, Dornall and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Saturday, June 18th, 2022. Hey, guess what?
I'm not at a loss. What is it?
I actually have internet.
Internet's back. All is right
It's back.
in Daddy Warpig's world.
They fixed it. And you'll never guess when they fixed it.
About 30 minutes ago.
No, although that wouldn't have been surprising. They fixed it yesterday. So fully I'd say 18 hours ago.
That's incredible.
And I discovered something I never would have thought. My computer is a lump of metal without the internet anymore. Everything I do on my computer is now utterly useless without the internet. Everything. I have programs to write, composition programs that also have, sections to store research and notes. I have video games on my computer. I am not just a console peasant. I have all sorts of stuff on my computer. It's all useless. All useless without the internet to authorize things and to let me research on the World Wide Web and stuff. It's just
the dreaded digital rights management.
Yeah, serious. And it's hilarious. I've got StarCraft 2 because I wanted to go play some StarCraft 2 last week. Yeah. And it let me play it for several days. And in the last couple of days, every time I launched it, it said install. It just wouldn't let me play it anymore. Apparently, there's some limit of number of times you launch it or number of days you can play it offline mode, where it just says, okay, now we're going to pretend like you have to update something. Because as soon as I launched it, once I had my internet back, it was like, install what? There's no update. And I'm like, you sons of...
That's
yeah,
obscene.
Blizzard, Activision. Yeah. Activision to Blizzard and stuff. But by the way, before we move on past this, there were some big, huge accusations of all this Activision-y, Blizzard-y behavior. Apparently, their
That's
arena
right.
match game, overboss or overdone or what is that?
Overwatch.
Overwatch, right. Apparently Overwatch 2 just launched and their big new feature was supposed to be PvE combat, but that was supposed to be there when they launched like last week. Isn't going to be there until January or maybe later in 2003. The roadmap just says 2003. And so somebody was complaining. It's like, what have they been doing for the last 3 years of development on this game? Why don't they have PvE? And the response on Twitter that I saw was brutal. They were like, sexually harassing their co-workers. And I'm like, oh, that's cold. Not unfair, but cold. Anyways, this sexually harassing their coworkers thing. Apparently there was a fridge of in the modern terminology, chest feeding milk. I don't know what that was about. I haven't dug deep into these allegations, but Activision did a huge investigation of Activision, and it finally and definitively cleared Activision of all charges.
Oh,
So I just thought the audience would like to know, in case you were wondering, there was absolutely nothing wrong going at Activision, and Activision has finally told us that that is the truth. Activision. So
Thanks, Activision.
I feel better now. Activision.
I'm glad Activision's looking out for Activision.
It is. Absolutely the truth. I swear it on my Activision.
And speaking of Activision, Diablo Immortal was released recently, and it's the pay-to-play, pay-to-win crap show we all knew it would be.
I took 20 minutes out of my life to watch an incredible video detailing exactly how bad that was. Not the one everybody was upset about, that wasn't actually what they should have been upset about, because it never said the things they thought that it said that they should be upset about, but like a really, really good one from a guy who took the time to play the game to find out how bad it would actually be. Just unconscionable. I'm shutting up so you can finish what you were saying.
I don't have anything to say other than,
okay.
If you expected anything less out of a free-to-play game made by the people who turned World of Warcraft into a casino, then you're just blind. You are, dare I say, a blind fanboy if you thought anything different.
We did a whole show on mobile games.
Yep.
Because I got into mobile games for like a month, and I played 4 different ones just to see what they were like, and I was quite upset, as I recall. But I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing a review of Diablo Immortal. I'm just not. This one video satisfied all my curiosity on that. I'm like, yep, that looks like addiction bait trash right there, and I'm not going anywhere near it. I respect myself, but I don't respect myself so much as to be arrogant enough to believe that I'm absolutely immune to psychological tricks and stuff. I respect myself enough to say, hey, you know what? Some things I just stay away from, because I don't know that I would, but I don't want to find out.
Wise.
Prudent, yeah. Sorry if I'm complimenting myself, but yeah, it is both a wise and prudent tact.
Wise, prudent, and handsome. Speaking of wise, prudent, and handsome, shall we talk about our guest this week?
Oh, yeah. Let's move on. Wait, but we haven't asked you how your week was. Let's do that real quick.
Oh, my week. A pretty slow week. I'm heads down at work, working on a brand new project. This one's a lot more writing and research. So if I'm cranky today, that's why. Allergy season
reading always makes you cranky.
Reading makes me cranky. Allergy season is in full effect in the Pacific Northwest. I've been sleeping like a total of 10, 12 hours every day. And not necessarily in a good way, but life is good. I don't have anything else to report. As far as geek stuff goes, I've been dipping my toe into retro games and planning and plotting a potential Dungeons & Dragons game with the help of my brother. That's been a ton of fun. On previous weeks, we talked about experimenting with the domain creation rules and the exploration rules.
Yes.
And so we continued that, learning a lot about how that system runs. Sometimes it feels a little bit of tedious, but it is a lot of fun to go through, at least as the game master. So I'll have more about that in future weeks as that develops. Other than that, yeah.
I watched a bunch of stuff this week because I'm keeping up on, the series that I'm going to review. And I will tell you, I have watched all of the Paramount Plus Star Wars, Star Trek stuff. I'm also watching Kenobi. And for the first time ever, and I mean ever, in all of Discovery and all of Picard, I haven't watched the cartoon series because I tried and it was just too painful. I'm not doing that again. I refuse. I'm not doing it. I'm sorry. I won't. I can't. Um, Lower Decks killed me. I'm not willing to endure that level of pain. I'm not joking. This is not a bit. It was painful to watch. And I respect myself too much to put myself through that level of pain for no reason. Just to come out the other end and saying it sucks, don't watch it. I can review that whole series right now. It sucks. Don't watch it. I saw the first episode. It sucks. Don't watch it. Um, and then I'm watching Strange New Worlds right now. And Strange New Worlds, for the first time in all of these live action Star Trek series, the episode from 2 weeks ago uh, was actually good. It was actually a good episode of a TV show. I'd give it a 75%, maybe an 80%. Honestly, really honestly, an 80%, solid B minus TV show episode. And a solid B minus Star Trek episode. They telegraphed the ending twist like Samuel Morse himself was at the helm, but yeah, it was a man, I'm shocked. You can tell how shocked I am. So, my review is almost certainly going to be along the lines of it sucked, don't watch it, except if you get a chance to watch episode, I think it was episode 5, track down that episode. It's all right. It's not worth watching the whole series for.
Come back with that episode and share a link if you could. And that'll suffice for the review. Watch this episode, the rest of it's crap.
Yeah, that's been generally what it is so far. Somebody on Twitter, and I'm stealing this is not my words, but I thought it was perfectly apt. Somebody on Twitter was saying that Strange New Worlds is like watching Star Trek having had a stroke, and it's learning how to Star Trek all over again. Now we can introduce our guest.
Yeah, speaking of entertainment that isn't awful, it doesn't hate you. Jim Breyfogle's back, author of fantastic fiction, in particular the Mongoose and Meerkat series, who our friends at Sirkova have been publishing. Jim Kursova. What'd I say?
Sirkova?
What? All right, we're doing Sirkova. Jim Breyfogle, apologize for mangling that. Apparently I can't talk today. Jim Breyfogle, thanks for joining us again.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate your having me.
Oh, we love to have you back, mainly because, and this is where we're going to start by flattering the guest, because of your passion and love for the work and the material. It's really good stuff.
Thanks. It's great to hear that.
Now we're not just here just because we like you and we like your stuff. What's new?
Well, we have Kursova is gathering together the next series of stories. They have been available serialized in the magazine, but now they're being gathered together in the second volume. So Tales of the Mongoose and Meerkat, Volume 2, The Heat of the Chase. It continues where the first one left off, of course, and carries the story arc forward. It also includes a non-Mongoose and Meerkat kind of a novelette length piece called Thunderhead. Just sort of if people have read the stories in the magazine and they're wondering why they might be interested in this, not only do you get all the stories in one place, but you also get something that has not been published anywhere before, and hopefully they would enjoy reading that as well.
I love that. So a bunch of the Mongoose and Meerkat stories collected in one place, plus a brand new bonus story. Now, I'm someone who hasn't been keeping up with Kursova, or Surkova, whatever we're calling it today. Kursova. So, what is new in the Mongoose and Meerkat world? Like, what would I be looking forward to if I were to pick this up for myself?
Hopefully you would, if you have read any of the previous stories, hopefully you would be looking forward to revisiting characters that you know and appreciate and seeing what they're up to, kind of like old friends. If you haven't, then maybe meeting a couple new characters and seeing what they're up to, like making new friends. But so the first book, some of the stories, you start out and the characters meet each other and they develop a relationship, and then they move forward into the story arc. And I don't know if any of the readers had noticed this, but they were kind of a little clunky at first. So, they might not actually accomplish their goal, or they might partially accomplish the goal, or they might accomplish the goal in a way that they really didn't intend to. As we move forward, I think they'll see that in this book and then the stories going forward, they're better at what they do. So things move a little more smoothly, which isn't to say they move smoothly or as intended. There's always unexpected consequences and things like that, but you will notice that they've kind of upped their game a little bit.
No, that's interesting, because even though it's a serialized, a bunch of serial stories like the old pulps, you do have character growth and change and consistency from story to story.
Yeah, if the people, again, I mean, this is part of the Mongoose and Meerkat experience, is the reader can read the stories and they can be independent, because each story is its own story. It's not like one of those, Saturday movie matinee serials that you leave in the middle and you have to come back next week to see how the hero gets out of the trap. But at the beginning of each story, there is kind of a timestamp, which, it's second world fantasy, so it's not like June 24th. It's just all relative to the fall of Allness, which happened before anybody ever got into the story arc. But it tells you where they are relative to each other, and they are sequential, even though you don't have to read them that way.
Because each story is enjoyable individually, but if you know which stories come before the others, you can track, the fates of characters and the growth of the main characters.
Right, and it's one of those things that if you read them out of order, you don't need them for the story, but somebody might say, "Hey, this guy," and this is an example I keep using when I talk to people because I'm not giving away any significant plot spoiler, but Mangos starts off and he can't read. And over the course of all the stories, he learns to read and he learns to write, and you can see his literacy progressing. So if you read him out of order, you might say, hang on, you just told me he can't read, but in the last one, he read just fine. And that's just because you read the stories out of order. It doesn't mean that you don't understand or enjoy the stories. It just means you read them out of order. But if you read them in order, then you get a better sense of that progression of the character arc overall. And it's I mean, a little bit arbitrary, of course, because I'm the author, but by time stamping them that way, it allows me to move people around geographically without, all the tedious walking that you see in some stories. Tolkien. But you can go from one setting to another without having to justify it or move them. So I mean, it works very well in a format like Kursova, because the reader just sort of assumes that between the last issue and this issue, of course, they moved around, and the timestamp shows that yes, they did in fact move around. But I don't have to show anything like, Mango sitting down with an English tutor or anything like that, which is terminally boring. But you just sort of assume it happened between the stories, and you see the results of it as it goes on.
Oh, that's great. And to my mind, it sounds like you're getting all the benefits of novelization without actually novelizing it. You don't
Yeah.
you don't need the connective tissue anymore.
Which is great, because some of that is the boring stuff. I think it was Elmer Leonard who writes mysteries, who are the trick to writing a good story is don't write the boring parts. which is really hard because the boring parts are necessary for creating a believable story. I mean, our lives are full of boring parts that get us from point A to point B. And if they're not there in the story becomes unbelievable because we expect it to be there. But you're right. In this format, I could just kind of write a lot of that stuff out, and it has the added benefit of, if you have something which is, you know, fully coherent, a lot of times you're stuck in one geographic location, or maybe you can move to another one, but again, then you take time and moving and stuff like that. Me, I can have any location I want because I can skip from one story to another, and one can be on a tropical island, and one can be in a frozen tundra, and one can be deep in the earth, and it makes perfect sense because I don't have to do that heavy lifting in between the stories.
Mm. Oh, that's fantastic. Now, in terms of, I'm going to keep going down that path because that's intriguing me. Because I think in terms of the business of writing, it seems that the most successful people do write novels. So, how does that compare with your experience? Like, are you pleased with the amount of readership that you're getting out of it? Like, is it striking that balance between not having to write the boring stuff and people actually getting exposed to your writing?
So that's a question it's almost impossible to answer gracefully, because of course the answer is no. I'm not pleased with my readership. I want everybody, I want Harry Potter levels of reading. It's great the number of people who are reading it. That is very flattering, and the success it's had. I don't want to belittle that or Kirsova's readership or anything like that in any way. I'm very very pleased with the way, because this is actually a really hard way to do something. And when you sell a story to a magazine, you're generally getting paid either a flat fee or by the word, and nobody pays the bills that way. Even if you're getting pro rates, you're not paying the bills by short stories. You got to be super prolific, and then you got to do something, like turn them into. I have no idea how much people got paid, but if you've seen Love, Death, and Robots on Netflix, those are all short stories that have been animated into something visual as well. And I assume that they got paid probably pretty decently for that. But just for a short story, I mean, there's just so much out there. People competing, trying to get their stories out. You don't get paid enough for that. So you're right. Novels, if you have a good novel, there's a lot of people who do novels and don't get paid for that either. But if you have a good novel that gets good readership, that gets good platform, that gets good exposure, you'll do much better than that. But for what I've done here, this is actually, and this is why I am very happy with it. I mean, it's almost like everything I wanted to have happen has happened so far. I wanted to be able to bring the stories out serially so that people could read them and follow along, and hopefully people would like them. And from the reviews and the feedback that I've gotten, people have liked them. And then I ideally thought it'd be kind of cool at the end of it to be able to gather them all into a book so that people could go back without having to pick up pack issues of magazines that they may or may not have, and then be able to read them all through at a go, and see some of the cues that, once you know the ending, sort of makes more sense, because now you know the subtext that was written in there. And Alex at Kirsova actually one-upped me, because he said, well, why don't we do it in 3 volumes instead of 1 volume? And I'm like, if you think we can get the readership for that, that'd be great. And so that's what we've been doing, and it's worked very well. It'd be nice to grow it even more. I don't think Alex would consider it an insult to say that, because I think he'd probably like to be able to grow it even more. But what we've done so far has been very good.
Awesome. I don't have anything intelligent to say about that. That's wonderful. I love to hear that you guys have a plan, and you've put the thought into it, which I love. Frankly, a lot of people we talk to, inside and out of the show, don't necessarily think about that stuff, or don't think of it beyond, hey, I want to be able to have a little cash in my pocket, or I want to be able to get my story out to people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's 18 stories, and I'm like, oh, that would be a perfect year and a half calendar. That'd be awesome. We can have Mongoose and Meerkat calendars for 18-month calendar, and then we can do, Just kidding.
Well, you've got some great artists. I think you could get Dark Philly to do a whole Mongoose and Meerkat calendar. Her illustrations are fun to look at.
She's done a great job, and that there's a couple things about doing this the way we're doing it, which is really cool and also flattering at the same time, is because you'd have to get the true story from Alex on how it came about, but my understanding is that she liked it and she started to sketch some stuff and she did a good job, and I don't know how she and Alex connected on what she was doing, but Alex came to me and said, we have somebody who is interested and likes the stories and would like to do that. Is that something that you'd be willing to allow? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's great to have somebody come to you and say, I like your stuff enough that I'd like to draw it. I mean, that's hugely flattering. But at the same time, your initial reaction is like, so how are they going to draw this? You know, I don't want anything crazy out here. And so he sent me some samples. And I'm like, yeah, this is cool. I like what she's doing. And so he's like, okay, then how about if you give her some direction? And this is what I think is really cool, is the way I wrote the characters for Cat and Mangos is very, very light on the physical description, for a couple reasons. One, it's a little disingenuous because nobody really wakes up in the morning, looks in the mirror and thinks about, oh yes, his big brown eyes and curly hair and unshaven chin. That's just an author's artifice to kind of give the reader what the character looks like, but the character is not usually that self-centered enough to do that for you, so it feels a little artificial. And I'd rather not do that if I can avoid it. And two, one of the things I want to allow in the stories to a certain extent is for the reader to be able to bring themselves into the story. So I don't really want to force the issue of what Mangos looks like. And in all the stories, in all 18 stories, there is not one description of what Mangos actually looks like. There are several things that describe what he can do. I mean, he is strong, he is agile, he's picking up different skills, but that's not how he looks. And the description of Cat is very sketchy too. We know that she has long dark hair, we know that she has green eyes, and we know that she is considered to be exceptionally beautiful. But nowhere do I tell you what exceptionally beautiful means. So when Dark Philly was starting to sketch, I'm like, well, it's going to be interesting because I really haven't said that, you know, Mangos is 6'2", 185 pounds with broad shoulders, narrow waist, looks like he pumps iron religiously, you know, no hair color, no eye color, no button nose or dimply smiles or anything like that. So to see how somebody who has read the stories, what sort of image they have in their mind, that's going to be fascinating. And it has been. Seeing what she's come up with, and the cover art from Anton. There's been a cover of one of the magazines had the Golden Pearl, and then the covers of the two books were all done by the same guy. And seeing how somebody else interprets your writing, because of course they don't have the same visuals I see in my head when I'm writing, but they only see what makes it on the page. And so she's done a fantastic job. And if people are interested in the Kickstarter, it is fully illustrated. It has Dark Philly's illustrations included, as well as one of Anton's covers. And there's working on getting some more illustrations in there that haven't been seen in the magazine as well.
Yeah, for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to scroll down through this Kickstarter to see if I can find any of those illustrations. There's a Dark Philly illustration at some portal,
which is really interesting because that's the same scene that the cover is. That's the Grain Merchant of Alamar. So what you're seeing there is Dark Philly's interpretation of they've just opened up. They've been ransacking some rich guy's house, and they think they're going to escape by calling a wizard to teleport them out. What they don't know is that instead of teleporting them out, what they actually do is open a gate and a demon comes in. intent to kill everybody in the room. I mean, it's a good way of mopping up a scene if you don't want any witnesses. And so that's Dark Philly's interpretation, and that was in the magazine. But the multicolored one, which is my avatar on the screen, as well as the first illustration that you scrolled past, it's the cover of Heat of the Chase, is Anton's interpretation of the same scene.
And that's from the other perspective, from the demon's perspective.
Yes.
The characters are escaping through some door, and he's rising up to do bad things.
Yeah, it's actually a window. It's I don't remember if I specifically said how many stories up it is, but it's not the sort of window that you jump out. It's the sort of window that you sort of slide out and climb down.
Oh, I don't think this demon's going to give him that chance.
No, it's not its intent. You're right.
That's cool. Really cool artwork, really cool everything. I do have a question from the chat. We touched on this earlier, but let's say hi to Carlos in the chat. Carlos asks if could we look forward to a Mongoose and Meerkat novel someday?
By that question, I assume that you mean a traditional sort of one plot linear sort of novel rather than a series of short stories that then have a different plot woven in the background. I never want to say never, but at this point, I've kind of I won't say that I've entirely moved on from Mongoose and Meerkat because obviously it's still being published in the magazine, but I haven't written a Mongoose and Meerkat story for years at this point. And I've got a lot of other projects that I'm working on, and I keep saying, and again, I'm trying really hard not to give endings away, but the fact that I've said there is an ending to the stories, and I haven't really envisioned anything beyond that ending. And for the people who have read at the very beginning the Battlefield of Karis, there really isn't much of a beginning before that if I wanted to do Mongoose and Meerkat, because it's very clear they meet for the first time in the very first story. So if I wanted to do a prequel, it would either be Mangos without Cat or Cat without Mangos. And that's an evil question to ask, because now I'm starting to think maybe there might be an interesting story there. But it wouldn't be both of them.
Well, we're here to put you on the spot, if nothing else.
What's this wee white man?
Mm.
No, I'm kidding. That would be cool, though.
Yeah, actually, wow. This is, as an author, this is a hard thing, because last year I was working on a story and it was really cool. I had a great time with it, and I got to a point probably 3/4 of the way through, and I just hit a wall. And I knew what the ending was, but I had a really, really hard time getting from where I was to where I needed to be to finish the book. And it was brutal, absolutely brutal. And it was not helped that along about October, I made a trip to Newport, Rhode Island, where my daughter was, she was graduating OCS for the US Navy. And they have all these beautiful houses there. So we went to her commissioning, and we went to some of the house tours, and it gave me a really, really great idea for another story. And I'm like, oh, this is absolutely awesome. I need to write this. This isn't just a book. This could be a series. This is just beautiful, and it's exciting, and I want to write it. But I'm still stuck in this other one. And it was absolutely torture trying to finish the story that I had no interest in writing because I didn't know what to write, versus the story that sounded really super cool and I really wanted to write that. And now you got me thinking about what I could write about a prequel for Mongoose and Meerkat. And if I think too much about it, it might just get exciting and I'll want to write it.
That's the key. You want Jim Breyfogle to write you some good stuff. Get him excited about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, it might have to, jot a few ideas down and put it in the queue and wait for its turn.
That's cool. Lots of love in the chat. Hey, everybody. John De La Rosa's here, Artanon Studios. Rawl, thanks for joining us. John Dacre, Mixed GM, he's got some love for you. He enjoys your Mongoose and Meerkat stories. Love the Path
Oh,
of Corman.
and the Paths of Core Manor. Excellent. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Paths of Core Manor. I've really enjoyed writing that one too, and talking about, are you happy with the numbers? I'm happy with the Paths of Core Manor, but I do feel like it's been a little bit overlooked, just because, yeah, I liked Paths of Core Manor. I think if more people were to pick it up, I think more people would enjoy it too. But it's nice to hear, John. Thank you that you enjoy both the Mongoose and Meerkat and the Paths of Core Manor.
I want to ask you about what's next, but before we get to that, Daddy Warpig, do you have any other questions?
I think that means no.
Fantastic. So let's move on from Mongoose and Meerkat, because you seem like you are ready to move on from Mongoose and Meerkat. I'm curious to know more.
Well, I mean, getting into other media, I mean, that question right there just might be kind of like The Godfather. I try and get out, it keeps dragging me back. But, there are some characters in the back of my mind that could get me interested in a prequel for Mongoose and Meerkat. But no, what I'm writing on right now I've been doing some short stories, but I've moved a little bit away from the short stories in the last couple of years, and I'm doing more novel length stuff, which is harder to find a home for right off the bat. Very fortunate. Actually, it was the end of the year before last. I'd just wrapped up Paths of Core Manor, and before I did anything else, I wanted to give Alex a chance to pick it up if he wanted to. So I approached him with the idea, and on really short notice, he did a great job of just saying, yeah, I really like this. Let's get this out. We can do it this year. So I think I approached him in December of 2000, and the Kickstarter was in the middle of 2021. Did a great job lining up cover art, great job copy editing and getting everything out. What I've been working on now, I mean, Paths of Core Manor, for those of you who haven't read it or don't know it, it's not like Mongoose and Meerkat is, that you can go through most of the book without knowing that there's subtext and stuff going on in the background. You absolutely do know that there is another story, but each chapter is from a different POV, so that you start off and you have Amara and Kellen, and they're going through their trials and tribulations, and you know what their goal is. But as they go in pursuit of their goal, there's another chapter a different POV character who has their own story and their own goal, and their story is wrapped up in that chapter, except in each one of them, either Amara or Kellen enters in and participates in that story as they pursue their own. And by the time you reach the end of it, you have all these little stories, but nowhere do you have the sense that Kellen or Amara's story is wrapped up. You know that that's still ongoing until you reach the end of the book. So it's still a series of short stories, but it's just not as disconnected as Mongoose and Meerkat is. What I've been doing now is more of the traditional novel structure, where you have one story and you're just going straight through, and you have chapters, and you can't pick up chapter 10 and expect that you're going to have a complete story in chapter 10. You've got to read the first 9 before you get to that point, and you got to read however many are after that point to get to your resolution. And all I will say about it, apart from it's really cool and it's really exciting and it fires me up, is it's a story about people, but some of them are dragons.
So besides, go ahead.
No, I want to follow up on that. I had a video. You know how Facebook does their little memories thing where they like show you stuff you posted on this day, years and years and years ago. Well, I just today I saw a movie that I reposted that was, what if Chinese people made Star Wars? And it was a fight scene from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where the swords were given the lightsaber glow. And as funny as it was to watch, it still is a scene from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And what I liked about watching it was this is the scene is absolutely about sword fighting spectacle. It's got Michelle Yeoh in it fighting the young lady from the movie whose name I can't remember because I really never knew it.
Zhang Ziyi.
Yeah. And they both are fantastic fighters. But here's the thing. The fight is unlike, say the Phantom Menace fight at the end with Darth Maul, absolutely telling a story because Michelle Yeoh is serene, she's confident, and she's in control. And even though she's pressed, that is, she's being attacked, and you can tell that she's having to exert herself to defend herself and to attack. She's not afraid. She's not, panicking. And then the other character is absolutely angry, absolutely driven, absolutely trying to not just hurt or kill Michelle Yeoh's character. She's trying to prove that she's just as good or better. And so just as much as it's a martial arts fight, it's also a story about a young character with something to prove, trying to win the fight just to prove that they're as good or better. And it is absolutely a story about character just as much as it is a fight. And I think that is so phenomenal because I really think that's something that has been leached away gradually, and that a lot of things that there are a lot of great movies where they add interest to the fights, where the fights push the plot forward, but so many movies skip it. In Maverick, which we reviewed last week, absolutely the fights drove the plot forward, and the fights were just as much about the story as anything else. And the one big example you can think of, obviously, is the fights between Rooster and Maverick during the training sequence. And then they carried that through with the push-ups that he's having to do after, or that Rooster's having to do after he gets shot down, that he definitely has something to prove. He definitely has an axe to grind. And it's just, it's amazing to where you have, yes, but it's really about the story being told. It's not just about the spectacle, although the spectacle is there.
Yeah, you seem to get that more in movies too, is that you have, a fancy chase scene or a big fight, lots of explosions, looking at Michael Bay or something like that. And Michael Bay does a good job because his explosions do sort of make it exciting and drive the plot forward. But if it doesn't, then it's just totally gratuitous. And you're left thinking that looked cool, but it's kind of like a low calorie meal. You're wondering if there was really anything to it. And that's one of the slams, I think, against genre fiction in the past. That you got all these literary people who are talking about the only thing you have going for you is these, cool space fights or these magical battles or, a fancy system of magic or technology or something that is different from the real world. So you're just dangling this thing out there for people to engage in, but there's nothing behind it. And sometimes, there's some validity to that. Somebody comes up with a really cool a really cool technology, and that's the only thing that's in the story because they don't have any people stories behind it. You don't have any good plotting or character or anything like that. And in Spec's defense, they're not all like that, and two, there's a bunch of really crappy stories that don't have speculative elements in it too. So expecting every Spec story to ring every bell out there is a little unfair. But that's, yeah, you're right. I mean, having that human element, good stories are stories about people and their challenges and the way they overcome or succumb to them. Hopefully overcome, but not always. And that's what really engages. And if you have an interesting technology, then it needs to be integrated into the story, because if it is the story, then you don't have a story.
Done. That's it. That's the show. I sense that was my time to follow up, but I can't follow you two guys. I mean, I definitely appreciate what you're bringing to storytelling. I think what struck me this time, the same as last time, is your passion and excitement for these projects. Which sort of leads me to what I've been sort of thinking in the back of my head. Is there a trick to exciting your imagination?
Not really. I mean, I'd love to be able to say whenever I hit the writing wall, then I do this, that, or the other thing, and it gets me through it. Anybody who's written knows that writer's blocks are not that easy to get through. Some of them you never get through. That's how you end up with trunk stories. And for those who aren't writers, a trunk story is a story that either you just can't finish, or it is so bad that you can't fix it to the point that it just goes in the trunk on the top shelf of the closet and it never comes out. It happens to everybody, and I have some of them too, for getting ideas. So the idea that really kind of took off, and ideas are kind of progressive, because you'll get something in your head, and maybe somebody will say something like this idea of another Mongoose and Meerkat is probably going to just, I'm probably going to keep circling back to it until I add characters, until I add settings, until I add a plot points to it, and then eventually I'll have enough of a story that I'm like, wow, okay, this is really exciting because I have enough to go with. But the one I'm working on now, I mentioned I was in Newport, Rhode Island, and for those who aren't familiar with Newport, Rhode Island, it was the summer home for a lot of Gilded Age millionaires from the 1880s through the 1920s. They would come out from New York City, and they just had these fantastic cottages, and I use cottage with air quotes around it because they're really mansions, and they're just unbelievable. I mean, if you recognize that you're building a house around a summer entertaining system, so summer entertaining season, so that the ballroom is on the main floor because it's easier to get to than if you put your ballroom up on the fourth floor, then you have a sense of what you're doing. I mean, millions of dollars to build these things with marble columns and stuff like that. But in the 1960s and 70s, taste had changed, and people were looking at these mansions not as beautiful architecture or craftsmanship, but as worthless. And you had high-end New York architects who were literally saying that there is no redeeming feature about these things. And so they were just tearing them down. And the original owners had died, nobody else wanted them, so they'd remove them. And I'm looking at some of these lots that used to have phenomenal homes on them, and they're not there anymore. And in the back of my mind, I'm just kind of running through this because I'm an old house junkie, and I'm looking at this stuff. I think that is just tragic, because somebody had a lot of creativity to design a house like this, and there were a lot of guys who put a lot of really high quality craftsmanship into building them, and then we just sort of write it off as not worth saving, and we level it. And when you're in the 1960s and nobody's building with a marble pillars anymore, you tear that house down, and what do you do with the marble pillars? You probably throw them away because nobody else wants them. You're not building them with any. And so my mind starts working around and around. I'm like, man, that is a shame that all that stuff just happened. And then I'm thinking, it's like, okay, yeah, we're on the East Coast, and a lot of the trash, the ways they distribute, the way they get rid of their trash is to load it on barges and just dump it in the ocean. And then, of course, it creates a picture in your mind of the debris of one of these houses just, 50 miles off the coast and dumped to the bottom of the ocean. And that's kind of an evocative image when you start thinking about all the, the fancy dinners and the balls and the gowns and the suits and all the stuff that goes into a summer party and then gone and dumped someplace like the bottom of the ocean. And I'm like, okay, so if I'm going to make a story out of this, if I want something that can somehow grab the essence of this, okay, we're not just tearing it down and dumping it in the ocean, but if you have a fantastic situation, how does it get torn down? And so my creative process just sort of thinks about that as, how can you do that? This doesn't work. This works. Okay, but if this works, then that implies something else, or it leaves another question. Then you just start creating characters to move the levers of the plot. And when I hit a wall, then sometimes I have to step back and say, do I have the right character? Is the character doing the right action? Are they not acting? And this is my problem. And for me, this is actually kind of a problem, is sometimes I get tied up in dialogue, but it doesn't give a whole lot of physical movement. You end up with, talking heads, and nobody wants talking heads on the TV screen, and you sure don't want them on the written page. So then I have to start saying, okay, so this scene lacks momentum. What do I need to do to insert momentum into the scene so that it feels like it's moving forward? Because the dialogue alone isn't enough. Let's get some action here. But it's generally a questions, and you give yourself some stock questions that when it's not working, the first one is, why isn't this working? And then sometimes if it's on the sentence level, you might just say, well, what I need to do is invert the sentence structure. Or I tend to use a lot of dependent clauses. And I'm like, maybe I don't need a dependent clause here. Maybe what I really need is a simple, short, move it forward sentence, because this is supposed to be an action sequence. This isn't supposed to be some sort of elegant, flowery speech. Just hammer it out. And sometimes at the end of the day, all the questions don't work, and I'm left going, oh, God, I have no idea.
Those end up in the trunk, or do you ever go back to those stories?
I usually I will do that, and sometimes the trunk story is just you haven't found the right fit for it, and I'll go back and I'll say, this really isn't as bad as I thought it was. But sometimes even that doesn't save it, because if I'm involved in a new project, I'm not going to pull it out of the trunk and work on that. It's like, yep, this wasn't as bad as I thought, but back in the trunk it goes. Sometimes I'll dust it off and I'll just send it out to a few more places to see if times have changed, editors have changed, maybe somebody wants it after all. And sometimes I look at it and think, oh my God, what was I thinking? Wow, this is, sometimes it's just no good. The characters don't relate. Sometimes it's seemed like it created a powerful image, but it's really just too narrow and it won't appeal to enough people. So yeah, if you find the right person, it's going to be great, but there aren't enough of those people out there to make it worthwhile. So just enjoy rereading it, and then back in the trunk it goes.
I hear you. Another question from chat. Carlos Carrasco wants to know, what's your writing regimen?
And not rigid enough, that's for sure. I try and write every day. And I do have a loose interpretation of writing, because a lot of the stuff that I do, I end up, Daddy Warpig mentioned the research and all the stuff that goes into his work. And I totally sympathize. If I didn't have an internet connection, my writing would grind to a halt, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into getting things right. Some of it is, so the current novel that I'm working on involves yacht racing, and I am very sad to say that I don't own a yacht, and I don't know a whole lot about yacht racing. So to try and be authentic in that, I have to take what sailing knowledge I do have and then add a lot of research to try and make sure that what I present is believable for the reader. That counts as part of my writing regime, that research that goes into it. Some of the stuff, if you want to set something in, say, second world France, and you want it to be absolutely French feeling. Um, Personally, I think that just throwing in some champagne and escargot is a little cheap. That makes it feel superficial. So I end up doing a lot of research on some of the regional cuisine. I might spend, 25 minutes just to come up with the appropriate hors d'oeuvres to serve. And so that takes more time. And then I sit down, and if I can get, some people are really fast writers, and I wish I was one of them. I know people who can hammer out 2, 3, 5,000 words a day. If I can get 1,000 words that I'm happy with, that's a pretty good day. Some days I can get 600 words that I'm happy with. Some days I feel like I'm going backwards because I not only have no words that I'm happy with, I'm going back and fixing stuff that I feel like I should have gotten better the first time anyway. But that's also writing day, rewriting, things like, right now, talking to other people about writing, and Mongoose and Meerkat doing a little bit of promotion. That counts as writing work. At least I pretend it does.
Throughout this interview and conversation, you've struck me as someone who gets inspiration from everything that goes in and out of your mind. So you can.
So yeah. And I'm gonna name drop a little bit because it was Tolkien. Tolkien did a little bit of writing on writing, and he called it leaf mold, which is, how very British. But basically, what he's talking about is everything that goes into your mind, whether it's reading, whether it's visual, whether it's experiential, sort of creates a leaf mold. And basically, what he's talking about is all that crap goes into a compost pile and it sort of rots down. And then what you write grows out of that compost, like seeds and things like that. And the more I think about it, the more I think he's absolutely right. And if you are sort of paying attention to what's going on around you, the world really is a fantastic place. I mean, things happen, and usually they're intentional, but sometimes they're accidental, and sometimes they're just so weird, or sometimes they're just so normal that it sparks something, that you create a story around it. And that's how stories, in my mind, really grow. You have an exceptional character, and a character is not a story, but they might have a story, so a story develops around the character. Or you might have an unusual scene, so the story develops from the scene or something like that. And yeah, I mean, it's, I don't want to say it's easy because you never know what's going to spark the inspiration, but if you're paying attention, there's a lot of stuff out there that could.
So I'm still back picturing a character compost heap where you're just you're just like you shovel it onto a garden and outgrows, a mongoose and a meerkat character out of your garden from your character compost pile.
That'd be awesome. I mean, it doesn't give them the cleanest of beginnings, but yeah, there you go.
It does sort of. It's a neat metaphor because when you think about terms or phrases like nothing new under the sun, and the way that people can simultaneously, coincidentally come up with the same or similar ideas, in different parts of the globe. It's because of that idea that, all this information is being filtered in and filtered out.
Yeah, well, the corollary kind of is what do you put into your compost heap, which is, it's an interesting question. It's affected the way I read stuff. I mean, I used to read just about anything that came across my desk. I'd be willing to read it, and so there's some good stuff that comes across your desk that way, and there's some stuff that isn't really that good. So when you write, you often write in a way that is familiar to you. And so if all you read is highbrow literary florid language stuff, then you're probably going to write that way. And if all you read is kind of semi-literate crap, then you're probably going to write that way. And so I try and be a little bit careful of some of the stuff that I put in my compost heap. So some of that beach reading, which I love beach reading, but I try and make it a little bit better beach reading than I might have 35 years ago.
Like, for
Just-
example, Cursova magazine.
It's the perfect thing to read at the beach, and it's the perfect thing to read, before bed and on weekends in the evenings. I mean, you just can't go wrong with Cursova. But yeah, I do end up reading. There's no way that you can guarantee that everything you pick up is going to be worth reading. But I do try and read stuff that has strong plots and strong characters and things like that, so that I don't fall into the trap of, yeah, I don't really need to plot this in any good way, or I don't need a strong character here. It's very flattering for an author when one of the readers says, I love this, and it's the bartender or something like that, because you realize that bartenders are people too, and while that person's on the scene, sometimes you can just, if you don't name them, you don't name them, but if you interact with somebody a little bit more, then you feel like they need to be more of a person. And it's really nice when somebody says, I love that character, don't you have a bigger role for them, or don't they have their own story? And you're like, yeah, they're a real person off screen, but they're not, because there is no off screen. It's just nice that you feel that way. So yeah, I'd rather be reading books that create those habits in you of recognizing what makes a good story, rather than reading books that encourage you to cut the corners. Corners are way too easy to cut as they are. I don't need any encouragement.
That's for sure. In any creative endeavor, putting in the work, really. That's how you get good quality work. It's actually putting in the time.
Yep.
Okay, Daddy Warpig, before I try to wrap things up, one last chance for questions or comments.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, give me one example of what you mean by cutting a corner.
So one of the things that I've had a problem with in the past in my writing, and I'm not shy, I've said it already on this thing, is that I believe good stories are character driven. That nobody wants to read a story about a tree growing, but when you have characters in tension, whether it's conflict against each other or obstacles to overcome or things like that make them grow and change, or reveal who they are, whatever it takes, a good story is character driven. I have a tendency to go a little bit lighter on the description. I have a bad habit of white rooming. So if I think that I can get away with it, I'll be less likely to give you a good visual of the setting and the things like that. And in the reader's mind, it's nice to have I don't want to say a tapestry in front of you, but it's nice to have a good solid picture of where you are. And I'm perfectly willing to let the reader fill in some of the details, but as I mentioned, if you're doing the French setting and you want it to feel like France, you've got to put in the time and effort to talk about, certain uniquely French characteristics of architecture, something that, you professions or crafts that you only find in France, food that they only serve in France. You need to have the French naming of things like that. And that all takes time and effort. And if you don't know it, it takes research. One of the things, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He did illustrations for comics, the Uncle Scrooge comic books. And he was very well respected because one of the things he did at a time when backgrounds were kind of stock backgrounds, if you had, Uncle Scrooge went to China, he had Chinese buildings in the background where other people didn't necessarily do that. And so his work was much better received because you had a better sense that they were actually going to China, because you could see the Chinese influence in the art. Neil Gaiman is the same way. He feels very strongly that you need to put in the work to make it feel authentic. And I need to be aware of where I have a tendency to skip on the work. So if I don't put it in, it won't feel as authentic.
So when you're going from New York to Santa Fe, you need to make sure that people know that the streets of New York are very different from the streets of Santa Fe, even though they're both modern American cities and they both have skyscrapers, they both have traffic lights and streets and probably even the same make and model of cars.
Yep.
There's still a big difference, and the feel of cities is different. Even if someone from, I don't know, Ghana or Moscow wouldn't necessarily be able to consciously describe the differences. There are differences, and you want to lay that out for readers.
Absolutely, there are differences, and if you look at them, some of them, I mean, yeah, if you have skyscrapers and even if they're designed by the same architect, even if they're taken from the same architectural plan book, the trees out front of them aren't going to be the same because you have two wildly different climates. The sky is not going to be the same behind them, again, for climatary reasons. If you have local, I mean, everybody has Home Depot and stuff like that, but if you have mom and pop shops around, they're probably going to be focused on different things, just because of the different cultural backgrounds that went into settling those areas. Your names on the streets are going to be different. One's going to be, more Puritan New England, or actually probably in New York case, both Puritan New England and Dutch influenced, and Albuquerque is going to be more Spanish influenced. So your street names are going to be different. All those little things that go into it. Yeah, those are the things that build credibility with readers.
All right, John, now I'm done.
All done. It has been fantastic. Thanks again for joining us again, Jim. I want to point out we got this Kickstarter going. Kursova's publishing more of your stuff. We got volume 2, 18 months worth of Mongoose and Meerkat stories. And anything else you want to say before we go?
Once again, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be on. The Kickstarter is going until the end of June. One thing I didn't mention, so again, a little bit of shameless promotion, getting back to the Kickstarter, is for the listeners who have not read the stories in the first volume, anybody who buys any version of the second volume will get an ebook version of the first volume. So it's a real quick, easy, free way to catch up on the stories. You can, if you're the sort of person who actually prefers to have a physical copy, you can do an add-on for the first volume as well, or you could do an add-on for Paths of Core Manor. And if you like collecting that really cool art we were talking about, I think there's still a couple of the original line arts from Dark Philly are still available. So those, yeah, a little bit of self-promotion there, but if the listeners are interested, they have until the end of June to follow through.
I did have a question. Are you going to be doing any appearances at like stores or cons anytime in the near future?
I used to. I haven't done it recently. I mean, COVID is sort of, yes, and I see if you don't have the Paths of Core Manor, that is also available as an add-on, and that is something that you could not have read by reading Kursova magazine. That is all only available in the Paths of Core Manor. I used to be a regular attendant of World Fantasy Convention. I haven't been for a couple years because of COVID. My wife is sort of trying to encourage me to go to the one upcoming in New Orleans, but I have not committed to that. Looking into doing a book signing in near Harrisburg. They periodically set them up for local authors, and I missed the one for the summer because I'm visiting family, but I'm thinking of getting in on the one on the fall. Honestly, I'm kind of an introverted person. It's hard to get me out to do signings or readings. Yeah, I mean, if there is anybody who is in the Harrisburg area towards sometime in August, check with Cabinet Maker Books, see who's on their list of signers, and if I'm there, I'm there. If I'm not, something came up and I didn't make it.
Oh, we appreciate you coming out of hiding as a writer and introvert to talk to us about this stuff. We love your stuff here in the Geek Gab. The chat's huge fans. Lots of love to you guys. I'm happy everybody who joined us live to talk about you and your work and writing and Kursova and everything. And I hope everybody listening live later really enjoyed getting some insight into writing cool pulp fiction. But that's all I have to say for this week, Daddy Warpig.
Well, you know how I said last week that every time we announce something, it immediately falls through. Jim actually came on the show, so I'm shocked that that didn't fall through somehow. And we are still scheduled for next week with Alexander McCrease from Adamant Entertainment coming on the show to talk about his currently running Kickstarter. And so we're looking very much towards that next week. He will be his first time on the Gab. And I'm hoping to get out to see Jurassic World Dominion. You're supposed to correct me there. That's what that.
Nope, I can't help you with that.
Did you say you were going to see that, or
Skin Suit Park? The Take My Money. No, I don't know anything about it except that it's come out this past week.
Yeah, but you didn't you say you were going to go see it though?
Oh no, I'm not going to.
Oh, you're going to let me do this by myself, all alone?
You bet.
Abandoned, walking through the wilderness with no backup.
Yeah, I want you to put that crap in your mental compost pile.
It's not like I've seen. It's not like I haven't seen worse. I mean, last night I watched. Joe Bob Briggs does his drive-in movie show on Shudder now. Used to be on Showtime, now it's on Shudder. So they did a special on AMC where he's rewatching the first season of The Walking Dead. So last night I watched it. Not the whole season, just the first episode.
The things you do to yourself for our show.
You know what's sad? I didn't actually even really do it for the show. I just wanted to watch something zombie last night, and I thought, what the heck?
Never changed, Daddy Warpig.
Oh, but we're done for today, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was there anything else you had to say, or?
I'm done.
Okay. I don't even have a review tonight. Oh, wait. No, yes, I do. I liked the Joe Bob Briggs episode of, doing his shtick around the first episode of The Walking Dead. They did a really thorough review of zombie movies and stuff, and that was cool. And they talked with the makeup guy on the Walking Dead, and that was cool. They had a lot of interesting stuff around the episode, which is fine because I've seen the episode like pretty much exactly 9 times. And so, what? 9 times? Don't give me that disapproving look. I can see you through the internet. You don't have a camera on, but I can see that disapproving look. Shaking your head in your chair. I know you. I've known you for almost 20 years now. Literally. So, don't get that way with me. So if you have AMC Plus, and I don't know why you would, because there is literally nothing on that service, except one TV show I want to see that I haven't seen yet. A Discovery of Witches. I don't know if anybody has seen it. It's got the really cute blonde chick from the live-action Sorcerer's Apprentice with Nick Cage in it. Oh, yes! Willy's Wonderland. Did you actually go see that?
Oh yeah, you want to do a review next week?
Yeah, because I just saw that this week.
Let's do it.
Okay, we will schedule that for the first few minutes of next week's show. I finally saw that, so we can review it. Oh, yeah, I want to do a review.
So that's
of that.
it.
That's
Alexander Matt Crease and role-playing games and Willy's Wonderland. Sounds like a good show.
That sounds like a great show for next week, folks. So anyways, yeah, there's nothing on AMC Plus except for A Discovery of Witches and this specific Joe Bob Briggs series where they've temporarily hosted it on AMC Plus instead of Shudder. So I don't know if you have, for some strange reason, subscribed to AMC Plus. I'm not saying I have, although I have. Watch this Joe Bob Briggs thing. Folks, I want to say thank you to everybody who turned in live to listen to the show, participate in the chat. Really, really jumping this week. Actually, as always, we have highly intelligent and widely educated audience who always brings their A game to the chat. We want to say thank you to everyone who will listen later. You can catch us on youtube.com/geekgab. That is youtube.com/geekgab. You can also get us on soundcloud.com, the Apple iTunes Store, or on the Google Play Store. Just do a search for Geek Gab to listen to us on the device of your choice or watch us on the web. We are signing out for today, but don't you worry, don't you fret. We will be back.